Learn from any artist in any time period, even if they don't have books or video tutorials, using my free study guide. At the end of the video, I'll apply what I learned from my Overwatch studies to my character Cassie, and see if I can make her feel like she's more part of that world. I will go into more detail in the study guide, but if you're already convinced, you can go pick it up right now on my Gumroad. If you're interested in signing up for a newsletter in case I make improvements to the study guide, have other character design tips, or you want to be notified when I need play testers for my game, you can go to my website and you'll receive the download in the confirmation email. I started learning art pretty late. I was 22 when I realized that I wanted to be an artist, and for the past 11 years, I've had a lot of teachers, I've done a lot of programs, some paid, some free, and I've collected a pretty large library of books. While I found that knowledge given is helpful, knowledge earned has made the most significant impacts to my art. As artists, our greatest asset isn't the programs, it's not the tools, it's not even our hands. An artist's greatest asset is his eye. The goal of this study guide is to slow you down and to train your ability to observe your favorite characters in meaningful ways. I've created a list of prompts to analyze many aspects of the character's design. Our goal as students is to try and get into the artist's mind as much as possible and to internalize the way that they design their characters. In many cases, this is more valuable than being taught by the artist because many artists work so intuitively that they have a hard time explaining how or why they came to that result. There are two formats, horizontal and vertical. I've included a baked-down PDF version and the original PSDs with the fonts from Google Font in case you want to reformat them. Included in the download are a couple sheets with the prompts that explain what to do. Okay, now let's talk about how the study guide actually works. There's a place for your character that you want to study, and then around that character are a series of titles that correlate to the prompts. The first four at the top are about what the artist is trying to convey, what they want to communicate about the character in the world with their design. So just going through them one by one. First we have our world. So what is the overall world that the character lives in, and then culturally, what is their world? So Overwatch, he's in a high-tech world, and then his role, his occupation in that world is as a DJ. What's his personality? Well, based on his pose, he seems to be boisterous and outgoing. What is the role that he plays in the games? This can be an interesting exercise would be not to play a game and just to look at it and try and figure out what their role is. But having played the game, we know that he's the mood setter. He can hype everyone up and get them moving quick, or he can heal. What is his build? So his build is going to communicate the type of actions that he does and what he's able to do. He's wiry and muscular, so that we know that he's going to move quickly, and he's not built like a tank, so he's probably going to be a little squishy. The next prompt is for color. There's a variety of ways that you can do this, but the goal here is to try and figure out the proportions of the colors. And then beyond that, you can see where the colors are located. So sometimes artists will intentionally choose not to let colors touch each other. So if we look, we don't really see yellow touching blue at all. It's always outlined by a darker gray. And green, most of the colors are actually separated by some gray or some transitionary color. So this is where you can slow down and look at that and try and figure out how they're thinking about color, where they're grouping it. We notice that at the top, he's got yellow, but he doesn't have any real yellow. I mean, we've got some bronze, but it's blue as it transitions down. And we can watch this color gradient as well. So we've got the bright yellow, the green that gets gradually darker, and then the dark blue at the bottom with that pop of green down by the skates. These are all things you can note. There's no test. It's not right or wrong. This is all just training you to slow down and find out what you can observe. Because whether these rules were applied by the actual artist or they're just things that you're making up, having your own set of framework and rules that you can play with and test is super valuable, because then you can go back to your art and say, okay, I think this is a rule for me. Let me check it out. And you can see if it works, if it doesn't work, and then you can try and refine that. And that also is how you build an art style. So part of this is training to understand other artists, and the other part is training to understand who you are as an artist and what you like and the way that you want to design your own characters. So the next, number 6, is proportion. This, we're just looking at how they're handling the transition from their primary to secondary to tertiary shapes. So again, no right or wrong answer. You're just looking here to find out how small do these shapes get and how wide is the transition from a primary to a secondary shape. The next prompt is common shapes. So these can be shapes that are common on this character that you see pop up a lot, or if you're familiar and you're studying a full IP, these can be shapes that you see that are consistent across that IP. So Overwatch has some common shapes. There's a lot of kind of hexagonal shapes. They do not use right angles very often at all. So here you can see I did a couple of shapes that I'm noticing pop up a lot, then some unique shapes. So something that I found doing these studies is that all of the Overwatch characters that I studied have sort of a logo. They have a graphic that represents them. So if we're looking at Lucio here, we've got this frog with headphones. Lucio very much is like a frog. He moves quickly, he jumps, he can stick to walls. So it really emphasizes his character. Then I did a study on Anna, and I realized that her graphic is the Eye of Horus, which makes a lot of sense for a sniper who stays far away and keeps their eyes on things. And then if we look at her daughter, who also has the Eye of Horus, well, Farah flies and she launches rockets and she provides justice raining from above. So those both play in with that character. Brig also has a graphic and it's a cog, which you can kind of, if you want to stretch it, you can say that she's a mechanic. She fixes machines. She also fixes people as a healer. And that was something interesting that I found. Also, I hadn't even noticed until I really spent a lot of time, but he's got a heartbeat/sound wave on his belt here. So those are fun things that you can notice as you're going around. I also noticed this kind of unique winged shape on his knees that I was really drawn to. So I noted that there as well as part of the study. So when we get to the bottom, we've got some interesting, unique opportunities to look at the character. So number 9 is eye flow. And this is something that I did when I was doing the Rivals and Overwatch comparison. And it's basically just mapping how your eye travels across a character. And I didn't realize how important this was until I saw how the Overwatch characters use it. And it's been super helpful for me when I'm designing characters that just feel kind of disjointed and confusing. You just map. This is a little bit of a mess, but you just kind of map as you're looking, like how are they using the details and the colors and the lines to direct your eye. So this is something that when you first try and do it is going to feel really uncomfortable. It feels weird. You're trying to check, is this possibly right? Does this make sense? Is this what the artist was thinking? None of that really matters. You just need to let go, try and figure out where is it flowing to. And the way that you feel is usually right. So just give it your best shot, try and make some line connections and see where you feel that your eye is being led and how they're using colors and details to do that. The next thing we have is detail. So an interesting thing is that good artists will group detail very intentionally. They'll group it in areas that they want you to focus on. So the first part of the prompt is to use a dark color and darken out anything that isn't a secondary or tertiary detail, and then to go over with another color and block out whatever is a secondary so that we're just looking at tertiary detail. That helps drill down the areas that the artist has spent more time adding detail because they're trying to communicate more with that space. So the prompt after doing the block out is just to try and figure out what is the artist trying to convey by emphasizing these areas with detail. So with Lucio, we can see that the way that he emotes, the way that he moves, and the way that he controls sound have all been emphasized. After that, we get to observation. Now, I'm not going to go over fully what this is in the video, but there are a list of prompts to think about shape transitions, how the shapes are oriented, how they taper, how are they treating straights and curves, and anything else that you noticed along the way. So this is just a way to verbalize and express the things that you think that you're picking up on. Because having them in your brain and feeling like, oh, I think I noticed this is helpful, but writing it down will help you develop that thought even further. And you might even start to say more than you thought you were going to, and you start to draw connections. So in the observation section is actually where I discovered that these characters do all seem to have a specific logo that connects to their personality and movement type. The next two phases are more interactive with the character. So there's an opportunity, there's a little space here. If you want to open up a new document and do it there, I recommend it. But there's some space to copy parts that you think are really interesting about the character and try and understand how the artist designed those parts. Because looking at them, you can think, oh yeah, I get how those points connect. But once you start to draw them, then you really slow down and look and see, okay, how is this piece fitting in? And is my understanding of the proportional relationship of these pieces accurate? Because this is really helpful for me. Whenever I do it, I realize that I tend to space parts out way more than they should be. and I don't allow them to wedge into one another. So this is not just a good place to do the study what the artist is doing, but also you're doing a study of your own artistic sensibilities and your tendencies. And all artists have tendencies. So being able to find out where you have tendencies that are weaknesses is super helpful as an artist, because then when you're looking at a piece, you kind of know, okay, what is my tendency here? And you can start to push and move that needle a little further toward not falling into that same habit. And then finally, this part's really fun. There is an opportunity, there's a suggestion to go in and actually make edits on the character. So this is getting you into the mind sort of an art director, but also you get to play with a character that's already fully designed. And you get to toy with the idea of, well, what would I do if I was designing this character? Or how would I take this character that's a support character and make it into more of a DPS character? And that's done by proportion, adding things, pushing and pulling. So I'll just show you what I did. I took him and in my mind, those hip pads just are way too big. So I've always wanted to know what Lucio would look like if his hip pads were a little more narrow and the proportions were a little more consistent for his legs. And then I also thought, okay, he looks a lot more like an attacker. So let's try and make his weapon a little more aggressive looking rather than, what it is, which is a little softer. And I think that helps emphasize the support role that he plays. So I squeezed it in a little bit. And then another step that you can go beyond is trying to understand the way that the artist renders by adding elements that aren't there, not just pushing and pulling and, lasso tool to make things bigger and smaller, but to actually try and paint on what they already have. And I don't think I was super successful here, but it was fun trying to figure out how he was using his paint and color picking and checking the values and figuring out what is the value range that he's using to convey these things. How, as an artist who uses lines in his artwork, how do emissive materials affect those? And I found that when he does emissive materials, he actually lets the emissive bleed over on top of his line work, which is just a little bonus fact that I gained from doing this study. So that's a basic rundown of what the study guide is, what it prompts you to do, and if there's stuff that you want to add on, feel free. If there's things that you think I missed that I can make this a more robust study guide, I would love it if you would drop that in the comment section or send me an email or whatever. If this ends up being helpful for you and you make a step in your artistic journey, I would also love to hear about that. So let's get into how I used what I learned to push Cassie to be more of an Overwatch character to my eye. But first, let's do a quick TLDR for people that don't have time to watch all that. The first 4 prompts are about what the artist is trying to communicate in the character design. 5 through 11 are how they communicate that through the design. 12 gives you an opportunity to interact more practically through drawing and designing. A couple extra notes. There is no test. You don't need to worry if the things that you observe line up perfectly with the artist's intentions. You're trying to understand what they do, but you're also trying to come up with rules to test out for your own artistic style. Filling out the observation section is important. Writing down your thoughts tells your brain to spend more energy developing that thought and can lead to deeper understanding. When doing the redress section, it's an opportunity to understand how the artist is designing, but it's also an opportunity to find out what your negative tendencies are so that you can address them. Here's how I applied what I learned to Cassie. My intention when designing this character was a snake-themed agile attacker with close-range combat abilities. First, I felt that the armor on her hips was too simple for an Overwatch design, so I applied some of the wedging shapes the Overwatch characters use. Second, the design for Overwatch characters has very clear reads. You know how a character moves and attacks just by looking at them. And as fun as the chunky shoes are, I only see her clomping around. She doesn't read as a quick viper, so I gave her hover boots that made it clear she was an agile attacker. Finally, the Overwatch characters I studied all had a graphic that reflected their personality and playstyle. With the redesign, Cassie's top didn't quite feel like it matched, so I swapped it out with this design. And that's all I got. Thank you so much for watching. I hope this can be a useful tool for you on your character art journey, and please reach out to me if you have any suggestions or comments or just to let me know that this helped you out. See you next time.